Hey, morning. We're in Luke chapter 13. Unless you turn to God. This is also a chapter, this is also a story which is where in Winnipeg the mission, Siloam mission, gets its name from. About that time, some people came up and told Jesus about the Galileans Pilate had killed while they were at worship, mixing their blood with the blood of the sacrifices on the altar. The abomination that causes desecration, the swine on the altar. But this is like even worse. It's some poor Galileans that were killed and their blood mixed with blood of sacrifices on the altar. Jesus responded to this horrifying story. Do you think those murdered Galileans were worse sinners than all other Galileans? Not at all. Unless you turn to God, you too will die. And those 18 in Jerusalem the other day, the ones crushed and killed when the Tower of Siloam collapsed and fell on them, because just in case you weren't all that concerned about Galileans' lives, we're going to talk about the Jewish folks killed in another disaster. The ones crushed and killed when the Tower of Siloam collapsed and fell on them. Do you think they were worse citizens than all other Jerusalemites? Not at all. Unless you turn to God, you too will die. And then Jesus told them a story. A man had an apple tree planted in his front yard. He came to it expecting to find apples, but there weren't any. He said to his gardener, "What's going on here? For 3 years now I've come to this tree expecting apples, and not one apple have I found. Chop it down. Why waste good ground with it any longer? It's not the ground's fault. Darn tree." But the gardener said, "Hey, let's give it another year. I'll dig around it and fertilize, and maybe it will produce next year. And then if it doesn't, we'll chop it down." And that's the end of the story, which leaves it kind of on a warning. Now that I've given you this fertilizer, if you don't turn around the next year. Okay, moving on. Healing on the Sabbath. Jesus was teaching in one of the meeting places on the Sabbath. There was a woman present, so twisted and bent over with arthritis that she couldn't even look up. She had been afflicted with this for 18 years. And when Jesus saw her, he called her over. "Woman, you're free." He laid hands on her, and suddenly she was standing straight and tall, giving glory to God. The meeting place president, furious because Jesus had healed on the Sabbath, said to the congregation, Okay. 6 days have been defined as work days. Come on one of the 6 if you want to be healed, but not on the 7th, the Sabbath. But Jesus shot back, "You frauds! Each Sabbath, every one of you regularly unties your cow or donkey from its stall, leads it out for water, and thinks nothing of it. So why isn't it all right for me to untie the daughter of Abraham and lead her from the stall where Satan has her tied up these 18 years? 18 years. I think she's waited long enough." When he put it that way, Jesus' critics were left looking quite silly and red-faced. The congregation was delighted and cheered him on. The way to God. This is also known as the parable of the mustard seed, but we'll see how this translator paraphrases it to refer to, I think, pine cones instead. Let's check it out. Then Jesus said, "How can I picture God's kingdom for you? What kind of story can I use? It's like a pine nut that a man plants in his front yard, and it grows into a huge pine tree with thick branches, and eagles build nests in it." He tried again. "How can I picture God's kingdom? It's like yeast that a woman works into dough for 3 loaves of bread and waits for the dough and waits while the dough rises." He went on teaching from town to village, village to town, but keeping on a steady course toward Jerusalem. A bystander said, "Hey, Master, will only a few be saved?" He said, "Whether few or many is none of your business. Put your mind on your life with God, personal responsibility. The way to life, to God, is vigorous and requires your total attention. A lot of you are going to assume that you'll sit down to God's salvation banquet just because you've been hanging around the neighborhood all your lives. Well, one day you're going to be banging on the door, wanting to get in, but you'll find the door locked, and the master saying, 'Sorry, you're not on my guest list.' And you'll protest, But we've known you all our lives," only to be interrupted with his abrupt, "Your kind of knowing can hardly be called knowing. You don't know the first thing about me." That's when you'll find yourselves out in the cold, strangers to grace, and you'll watch as Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and all the prophets march into God's kingdom. You'll watch outsiders, Gentiles, stream in from east, west, north, and south, and sit down at the table of God's kingdom. And all the time you'll be outside looking in and wondering what happened. This is the great reversal. The last in line put at the head of the line, and the so-called first ending up last. What kind of outsiders do we have in our lives that we consider to be on the outside looking in, the last in line? Just then, some Pharisees came up and said, "Run for your life! Herod's on the hunt! He's out to kill you!" And Jesus said, "Tell that fox that I've no time for him right now. Today and tomorrow I'm busy clearing out the demons and healing the sick. And the third day I'm wrapping things up. Besides, it's not proper for a prophet to come to a bad end outside of Jerusalem." He's like, "I'm not even in the city yet. What do you think I'm gonna, you really think I'm in that much danger?" And then he quotes, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, killer of prophets, abuser of the messengers of God. How often I've longed to gather your children like a hen, her brood safe under her wings, but you refused and turned away." And now it's too late. You won't see me again until the day you say, and he quotes again, "Blessed is he who comes in the name of God."